Welcome to another midweek Space Startup News Roundup. You can follow us on X at Space Startup Hub. I post videos there and sometimes reply and post other content, so please follow us on there if you're on X. So without any further ado, let's get into the first article this week, and that is on Starlab. So first of all, I need to share the screen, bring it up. Here it is. This is a post from Voyager Technologies, which is the prime contractor for the Starlab Space commercial space station. In this post, they say, when it comes to next generation space stations, the numbers speak for themselves. 7.7 meters wide, 17 meters tall, 6 floors, 400 cubic meters of pressurized volume, 80% larger diameter than any ISS module, that's International Space Station, and 100% of ISS payload capacity. A next generation station built for scale, science, and mission continuity. And I guess this is from Crew Dragon or something as it approaches. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a nice graphic. So that is the post. So if you're not familiar with Starlab, I have this little render here. So this is what it looks like. It's one module, but it's very wide, 7.7 meters, which means it can't launch on a medium launch vehicle. It has to launch on SpaceX Starship. Although with the new upgrades to New Glenn, it could technically launch on a New Glenn vehicle because it has a diameter now of 8.7 meters, and this 7.7 meters could fit. But they've already selected their launch vehicle, and here's the post. This is from Starlab Space. Launch vehicle secured alongside Voyager Space and Airbus Space. We are thrilled to announce we have selected SpaceX's Starship to launch Starlab into low Earth orbit. So that's already selected. They have the launch vehicle and they have a number of partners. So if I share a screen, and here it is. So the partners are Voyager. This is a prime contractor. They also have Airbus in Europe that will be making the primary structure. Then we have Mitsubishi Corporation, Japan, and we have MDA Space from Canada. And we have Palantir Technologies from the US, and we have Hilton, and we have Northrop Grumman, and we have the Ohio State University. So those are the partners, and they keep adding more partners all the time. So we have a look at MDA Space. They're well known for the Canada arm that's on the International Space Station. And we have another graphic here of Canada Arm Robotics. 55-year record of first and 450 plus missions. Okay, we have some more news about Starlab Space. This is an article on Mitsubishi investing more in Starlab Space. So let's have a look at this article. Mitsubishi Corporation joins Starlab as major space station customer. So Mitsubishi Corporation has reserved and pre-purchased capacity on Starlab's commercial space station and simultaneously increasing their investment in the company. So they've acquired usage rights for designated payload volume and utilization of an on-orbit lab facility on Starlab. So Mitsubishi has a long-standing relationship support for JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, and it will be working with JAXA for future collaboration on space program transitions to the commercial platform. So moving from the International Space Station. So Japan has a Kibo module that's connected to the International Space Station. So obviously they want to continue on-orbit research. So they have to transition to one of the commercial platforms. And it looks like it potentially could be Starlab Space with Mitsubishi's support for that venture already. And Starlab Space says that Mitsubishi is an invaluable partner as we work towards our CDR, that's Critical Design Review, that was conducted in December 2025. So Critical Design Review is the key milestone, and once that's passed, they can start building flight hardware. So Starlab is the largest and most advanced commercial space station in operation. At 7.7 meters, it's definitely the largest in terms of diameter, and Starlab has achieved more than 27 development milestones and received $217.5 million from NASA, that's CLD, this is Commercial LEO Destinations, Phase 1 program, and $15 million from the Texas Space Commission. So that is the article. So obviously Phase 2 of NASA's CLD program is coming up sometime this year in 2026, and one or more contracts will be issued by NASA to continue work on the commercial space stations. These will be Space Act agreements, just like Phase 1. So that's good news. NASA will accept more basic facilities. Obviously these commercial ventures don't have the kind of funding that the International Space Station has. They can't replicate the International Space Station, at least not to begin with. And we have another article, if I can bring it up. So this is Starlab developer commercial space stations secure strategic investment from Janus Henderson. Janus Henderson, apparently a global asset manager, are making an investment in Starlab Space. So they describe Starlab as a global joint venture led by Voyager Technologies. We have strong conviction that Starlab has the best design, lowest cost profile, and most compelling business model of any of the contenders vying to replace the International Space Station after its deorbit in 2030. And the CEO of Voyager says this partnership underscores the confidence from customers, partners, and financial institutions that Starlab offers the right design, the right team, and the right business model for the post-ISS era. We are building a commercially sustainable, transformative platform, and this investment reinforces that we're on the path to delivering it. So that's the article. I think it has more international connections and partnerships than the other commercial space station contenders, especially Vast Space. So I like Vast Space, but it is very US centric, and I think it could find it a little harder to get missions from Europe and Japan, particularly when you have something like Starlab Space, which has Mitsubishi and Airbus directly involved in building and maintaining and operating the space station. I just think from a relationship point of view, a Japanese customer can talk to Mitsubishi and they can talk in Japanese, and it's just going to be a lot easier to get things done and to have confidence in the space station rather than a US-centric space station like Vast Space. I do think partnerships and relationships do matter. Axiom Space is somewhere in the middle. It's a US company, but the primary structure is built by Phase Alenia in Italy. It's somewhere in between. Starlab Space has a lot of international partnership, and Northrop Grumman will be providing the Cygnus cargo vehicle for resupply, which they do for the International Space Station. So they are testing docking with the Starlab Space Station to make sure it's compatible. I assume Starlab is also compatible with Crew Dragon and Cargo Dragon. So that's the first story this week. Okay, our second story this week is on K2 Space. So there's an article on the website. It's from PR Newswire. K2 Space raises $250 million at $3 billion valuation to roll out a new class of high-capability satellites. So K2 Space, developer of large, high-power satellite platforms, announced a Series C $250 million at a valuation of $3 billion, and it's for the next generation of spacecraft built for the heavy lift era. That is SpaceX's Starship and Blue Origin's New Glenn. So they already have $500 million in signed contracts. They were founded in 2022, so I've done a video on K2 Space, so if you want all the details about the company, you can watch that video. They were founded in 2022 on a single idea. The rise of launch vehicles like Starship and New Glenn will make it possible to build an entirely new category of satellite, redefining the architecture needed for the next generation of missions. K2 is tackling one of the biggest limitations in the space economy, meaningful increases in power and scale. At the moment, satellites have very little power, maybe 1 kilowatt or less. They really are limited in what they can do in terms of payload and sensors and capability. K2 Space wants to increase that with a massive increase of power, and that requires a bigger satellite bus. So they're rethinking the satellite design from the ground up, and the result is a platform that can support entirely new classes of missions. The team designed the highest power Hall effect thruster ever flown, 4 times more powerful than anything that's flown to date. They've already flown some of their systems in space, so they validated the flight computer, the reaction wheel, and the avionics stack in space. So they de-risked the core of the platform ahead of full-scale integration. In March of this year, 2026, they will be launching Gravitas, the company's first production of its Mega class satellite. So they're working on 2 classes, the Mega class, and then later there will be a Giga class. So Mega is designed to fly on today's workhorse rockets, including Falcon 9, Vulcan, and Ariane 6, and I'm guessing maybe even Neutron from Rocket Lab, although I'm not sure about that. And it would deliver approximately 10 times the power of other satellites in its class. So they will be testing the first in-space firing of a 20 kilowatt Hall effect thruster, the first deployment of the large twin 10 kilowatt solar arrays, and the first on-orbit exercise of K2's high voltage power system. So the factory they have can produce up to 100 high power satellites per year. And after the Mega class, they will be working on a Giga class, which is built for super heavy lift. So K2 will next unveil plans for designing Giga, its large class spacecraft designed specifically for Starship and New Glenn. And Giga will deliver 100 kilowatts of power per satellite. So that's suitable for AI scale compute on orbit and mass-produced giant telescopes. So that is the article. And if you're not familiar with K2 Space, we have some slides from the company's website. So you can see as payload mass increases, the cost of the satellite increases, but K2 Bus is down here. It has a large payload mass, but the cost of the satellite isn't that great. And here we have another graphic from the website. Because of new vehicles, super heavy lift vehicles like Starship, the amount of mass to orbit is going to increase massively to over 1 million tons of payload to orbit per year. And this is based on 10 Starships per year with an average of 3 flights per day. So much more mass to orbit. So they want to take advantage of that. Here's a slide of their 2 satellite classes, satellite buses. You have the Mega class, which will be launching in March of this year. So it's 3 meters by 3 meters. Mass is 4.5 tons or more, and it has 20 kilowatt Krypton Hall effect thrusters. The thrust is about 0.5 to 0.7 newtons. And then later on, they will have the Giga class, which is suitable for super heavy lift launchers, and it will be at least 5 meters by 5 meters. That's a guess. It could be more. And the mass will be over 15 metric tons. So at over 15 metric tons, it cannot launch on Rocket Lab's Neutron, which has a maximum payload mass of 13 tons. It can definitely launch on New Glenn and Starship. So they're talking here about maybe 40 to 60 kilowatts of power for Krypton Hall effect thrusters, and the thrust would be 2 to 4.5 newtons with a delta V of 4 to 6 kilometers. That's a lot of delta V, 4 to 6 kilometers. We have a graphic here of one of their satellite buses, so you can see it's quite a big bus. But what's most exciting for me is, first of all, this platform is great for orbital AI compute. So I think it would be ideal for the large constellations of AI satellites that all the major tech companies are thinking about. When I see this size bus, it makes me think of nuclear electric propulsion. Because if you think about it, K2 Space already has high power, high voltage systems already, 20 kilowatt ion thrusters already integrated into it. So if you replace the solar panels with a nuclear reactor, you have a nuclear powered spacecraft, a nuclear electric propulsion spacecraft. So I'm not the only one who's thinking this way, because if we look at the Project Athena document, and this is under key contracts and commercial interest for nuclear propulsion, you have a lot of like nuclear companies here, Antares and so on, but you also have here K2. So Jared Isaacman is also thinking, when it comes to nuclear powered spacecraft, he's thinking about K2. And it's the obvious platform for nuclear electric propulsion because it's very, very large. If you look at the diameters, very, very large, and it can accommodate very powerful ion thrusters with high voltage. So all the electronics and so on are already rated for high voltage. So it's just a matter of swapping out the solar panels and putting in a nuclear reactor. That's it. And I have one more graphic to show you the maximum payload for different vehicles. And you can see for 5 meter class Giga satellite bus, you're not going to be able to launch it on a Falcon 9. And I don't think there's enough clearance to launch it on a Vulcan Centaur. This is the most powerful one. You're going to need Starship with a payload diameter of 8, internal payload diameter of 8 meters. The New Glenn will have 8.7 meters, the upgraded New Glenn. So both New Glenn and Starship can launch a Giga class satellite. All the medium launch vehicles can launch the Mega class, including Rocket Lab's upcoming Neutron. Okay, our final story this week is on Lunar Outpost. They posted a video on their LTV, Lunar Terrain Vehicle. So let's just watch the video. So it's quite a rugged, sturdy LTV. It's an unpressurized vehicle, the same as the Moonracer from Intuitive Machines or Astrolab's Flex rover. All 3 are in competition to win NASA's LTV award, and the winner will be on a future flight to the moon. So crab mode, it can go sideways, it can turn on a point, it can go quite fast, and yeah, it looks good. So that's the Lunar Outpost vehicle. We have some still images from them. They've been evaluated by NASA, and hopefully at some point this year we'll get an announcement on who's won LTV award. The 3 are Intuitive Machines Moonracer, Astrolab's Flex rover, Lunar Outpost Eagle vehicle, which is what you're looking at now. And we have some more images of the vehicle, so it's easy to get in and get out of, which is important. And we have some renders here. This is a render of the vehicle. And then we have this one here, which is quite interesting. I put myself in the corner. We have this one as well. Don't really have a lot of information, or I don't have a lot of information about this vehicle. So we'll just have to wait and see which one of those 3 vehicles wins the NASA award. And I don't know whether the other companies will continue with the LTV if they don't win the award. We'll just have to wait and see. So anyway, thank you for watching this midweek space news roundup. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. My next video should be out on Friday, so see you then.